Parshas Tetzaveh. B'medrash, Lama nichtavu bigdei kahuna etzel Parshas hakarbanos. The Medrash asks a question. We find in Parshas Tetzaveh, bigdei kahuna, and then right afterwards comes the parsha speaking about the karbanos miluim. So we have the bigdei kahuna and we have the karbanos side by side. So why is the topic of the karbanos written next to the topic of bigdei kahuna? And the answer, Lomar lecha maha karbanos mechaprin af bigdei kahuna mechaprin. In order to tell us that just as atonement is achieved by sacrifices, so atonement is achieved through bigdei kahuna. That means the wearing the bigdei kahuna. And then it goes to enumerate hakoshen mechaper al hamishpat shekein ksiv es hakoshen hamishpat. Ephod mechaper al avodas alilim sheneemar vein ephod utrafin. Me'il mechaper al lashon hara amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu yavo davar shebakol v'yechaper al maaseh hakol. So the meal has bells at the bottom, it makes noise, so it comes to be mechaper on something that has to do with noise. That's lashon hara. Kasainas mechaper al shvichus damim sheneemar vayitbelu es hakasainas badam. That's talking about Mechiras Yosef. They took his kasainas and they dipped it in blood. Mitznefes mechaper al gasus haruach yavo davar shebagoiva v'yechaper al maaseh hagoiva. That means a haughty person is like high and mighty. So the mitznefes, which is a turban, should be mechaper on something that has to do with high. Avneit mechaper al hirhur halev. The avneit is a belt. It was worn around close to the lave, and the hirhur halev is what is mechaper on. Mechnasayim mechaper mangili arayas tachsiv lechasais basar erva has to do with illicit relationships. Hatzitz mechaper al azus panim sheneamar umetzach isha zoina v'neamar v'haya al metzach Aaron. Both of those have to do with forehead. Brazenness is the metzach, and the tzitz was worn on the forehead of Aaron. So the question is, how was this kapara achieved? Did the Kohen merely have to wear the garments and automatically there was an atonement? Is that the way things work in Yahadus? Chas v'shalom, we know that of course not. The Torah condemns the notion that a mere mechanical performance or ceremony or recitation of any pesukim formula or wearing garments, just the wearing appeases Hashem and brings about the desired results. The Nevi'im all the time were mochiach. They were rebuking Am Yisrael for bringing sacrifices, karbanos, without remorse and without doing real tshuva. Tshuva involves a profound change, remorse, abandoning of errant ways. The Baal Tshuva effectively must become a new person. So how are we supposed to understand Chazal's message that the bigdei kahuna achieved atonement? So, I want to bring the Ramban, for example. When a person brought a korban, how does the Ramban describe the bringing of the korban that achieved kapara? Yachshav adam ba'asoso kol eila ki ra'ui lo lishafech damo v'yisaref gufo. The person is bringing the korban, and he sees the shechting of the animal, the slaughtering of the animal. He sees the blood coming out, and he thinks that blood is supposed to be my blood. When I did the chet, it was coming to me that this should happen. Lule chesed habore shelakach mimenu tmura v'chiper al-karban hazeh shehei damo tachas damo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did this very big chesed, this very big kindness, and he allowed me to bring something in my place. And the person has a very visual experience that profoundly affects him. He knows that was supposed to be me. And this profound experience helps him really do tshuva. So it's not just bringing the animal that does the tshuva and the kapara. It's a whole experience that he undergoes, a metamorphosis. So that's with karbanos. But what about bigdei kahuna? How does it happen that he gets kapara? So I'm going to go now and remind us what we spoke about last week. We quoted from the Baal Shem Tov, who speaks about the mitzvah of para aduma, even though it's not actually done today, and it's done few and far between happenings in history. In the whole of history, only 10, but still there's something relevant in the concept of the paraduma that is eternal and relevant for all times and also for today. Akedas Yitzchak, that's Rav Yitzchak Arama, he has a similar take on the mitzvahs and specifically on Bigdei Kahuna. So here he says, Kol ma shekasavnu mi'inyanei hamishkan v'hamenorah. So he wrote this about the same idea about the Mishkan and the menorah. Humoel etzleinu hayom kiyom hamaaseh. It all applies also today. It's relevant. V'chein kol ha'inyanim hamuskalim lo yischalef etzlam ha'adam ha'shalem. It's not going to make a difference for a person that really knows how to approach Torah. It's not going to make a difference to him. Im yimatzu lefanav b'fal or shelo yimatzu. If he has a paraduma, if he has a menorah, if he has the materials to go and build the Mishkan, or if he doesn't. Like today, we don't have these things. A mashal. So he gives a mashal, and I'll say it in summary. He gives a mashal of the mitzvah of te'ina, which means a person that sees somebody that he doesn't get along with so well, and he is loading his donkey, and even though he doesn't get along with him, it has a mitzvah to help him load up his donkey. Now, what happens if the person doesn't have someone that he doesn't get along with so much that's loading his donkey? Does that mean that mitzvah has nothing to do with us today? So he says, no. There's a purpose in this mitzvah. There's a concept of this mitzvah. I wouldn't say purpose because we don't know the reasons for mitzvahs. We just give explanations for things that we can call. So here we have the mitzvah of te'ina, and he speaks about it. Laho'il ha'ne'ezar u'laharchik ha'eva mibein ha'anashim. So a person that thinks about it understands that one thing that is accomplished by doing this mitzvah of te'ina is it uproots from our hearts eva, feelings of hatred that we have between ourselves and other people. V'yita b'libo mida zu l'kinyan gomer. He'll have it for all times. That learning, that concept that he took away. Hine kvar yisnaheg be'ilu hamidos hashleimos b'chol davar she'avot tzarcho lefanav af al pi shelo yizdamein lo chamor sono oshoro. Okay, he doesn't see his chamor every day, the chamor of the person that he doesn't get along with, or his shore. But still he understands that the Torah wants us to uproot sinah from our hearts. And he's going to work that out into any situation that comes up his way that has anything to do with that. Ki hakavana b'kula l'lamed ha'anashim la'hargilam el hatov ha'yashar ha'ra'oi lios bo tamid. You can take this rule and apply it to all mitzvahs, because what comes out from all of them is to teach people to do good and to do righteous and to be with that for always. Ulazeh, he says, ein mitzvah miha-mitzvah su'masa miha-masim ha'toriyim shelo yo'ilu tamid. If you take that rule and you apply it, you can apply it to all mitzvahs. That should apply for all times and also now. Va'al zeh ha'ofen be'emes lo batla avoda la'olam. Even though we don't have a Beis HaMikdash today, and we don't have a Mizbeach, and we don't have the mitzvah l'maisa of bringing karbanos, lo batla avoda la'olam. It is always relevant. Ki mas ha'karbanos batlu, haskalatam lo batla. The concept, the lesson that we learned from it never becomes canceled. It's always relevant. And like we said, the Ramban says, a person, and here he speaks about the karbanos. He's K'mosha Amar David Zivchei Elokim Ruach Nishbara Leiv Nishbar V'Nitkei Elokim Lo Yitivzeh. In Tehillim we say, what is the Zivchei Elokim? What is the essence of Zivchei Elokim, of all the karbanos? Is Leiv Nishbara, Ruach Nishbara, Leiv Nishbar V'Nitkei Elokim Lo Tivzeh. Amar Achar Sheyadanu Sha'Kavana B'Zivchei Elokim. Since we know that this is the essence of the karban is a Ruach Nishbara, Hine Yadanu Ki Leiv Nishbar V'Nitkei Af Ki Yeh B'Li Karban K'gom Bazman She'in Beis HaMikdash Kayam Elokim Lo Tivzeh. That's always going to be accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah, kihine haTorah asher biyadenu al zeh ha'ofen hikli omanus biyadenu. We have the tools in our hands. Lachachin lefanenu es haderech hanachon bo nihya kelokim lahanhig ha'olam. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us the reins in which we can rule the world. L'to'alatenu ulahanatenu l'tov lanu kol hayamim l'hachyotenu b'chol ha'makomot b'chol ha'azmanim. And this we say we can learn from all the mitzvahs. There's no such a thing as a mitzvah that doesn't apply today. There's some way, in some conceptual level, that you can always learn from the mitzvahs. And that we also find the Balakedas Yitzchak in the issue, in the inyan of Bigdei Kahuna. Something phenomenal that I discovered in him, in his words. Balakedas Yitzchak points our attention that there is a synonym in the Torah that we find for Bigdei Kahuna. The synonym is the word midos. And he gives a few examples. He gives the example of in Tehillim, Zakan Aharon shall yored al pi midotav. That means when Moshe Rabbeinu was he put the Shemen HaMishcha on Aharon, a few drops went down on his clothing, and there was a diyun about if that was Me'ilah B'Kodesh. But Midosav in that pasuk is referring to his clothing. Another pasuk we find in Vayikra, V'lavash HaKohen es Mido Bad. He wears his clothes made of linen. And another one in Nevi'im, Vayaslo Ehu, that's in Shoftim, Cherev V'lash Dei Pios, and it says, Mitachat leMadav al Yerach Yamino. So Madav, Midos, these are synonyms for Begadim. And there is a connection between Midos and Begadim. Midos translates as measurements. You make clothing according to your measurements. You don't wear something that's too big or too little. Also, the Bigdei Kahuna had to be perfectly fitted to the measurements of the Kohen that wore them. As I quote the Rambam, Bigdei Kahuna mitzvasam sheyu chadashim na'im u'mushulashim Meshul Shalim, Kederach Bigdei Hagdolim Shenemar Lechabod V'Letif'ares, Hayu Metushtashim, O Mekurayim, O Aruchim Yaser Al Midato, if they were faded or torn or too long, O Ketsarim Pachot Mi Midato, or too short, Avodaso Pesula. He couldn't wear clothing, Bigdei Kahuna, that didn't fit him. They had to fit him according to his midos. So there we see a connection between Begadim and mido. But one second, you say to me, that word sounds even more familiar. In Hebrew or Lashon HaKodesh, we use midos when we're checking out shidduchim. Midos denotes character traits, measurements. And what's the connection between measurements and midos? A person must carefully check and measure all of his behavior. Oh, one second, before I say that, Balakeda, he says we also find in other languages, the same words used for clothing as for midos, as for behavior character. And he even brings an example. The example, he calls it in Hebrew letters, I read this, abitus. Hey, I know that word. That sounds like habit. And isn't habit in English a habit? Is a person, the way he behaves, he has a habit. And habit is also a suit, a riding habit, a riding suit. In French, the word for clothing, or for suit, is habit, clothing. So also in other languages. And why would we call midos, meaning measurements? A person must carefully check and measure all of his personality traits and adjust them in order to achieve balance, functional balance, as he strives for spiritual perfection or in integration. Is he being too strict, too stingy, or critical of others? Maybe he's being too soft and he's a pushover and he's soft with people. Maybe he's too active, we call it hyperactive, or maybe too laid back. That's also not good. As the Rambam teaches us, all aspects of the emotional makeup of a person must be balanced by measuring. And I quote, Lo yikfotz, this is from the Rambam, Lo yikfotz yado yabiyoter, lo yifazer mamono. You shouldn't be too stingy, he shouldn't be too generous, giving his money all over the place, indiscriminately. Ela nosein tzedakah kafi masat yado, umalave kafi karaoi lemisha tzarich. V'lo yehe muhulal v'sochek. You shouldn't be too frivolous. V'lo atzuv v'onein. And you shouldn't be too depressed and sad. Ela sameach, something somewhere in the middle. Sameach b'chol yamav, b'nachas, b'sever panim yafos, v'chein shar deosav. When he says deos, the Rambam refers to midos. V'derech zu hi haderech hachachamim. B'chol adam shedeosav deos benonios. Anyone who has these middle of the way midos, nikra chacham. He is a wise person. Midos meaning character traits. The Bigdei Kahuna, like we saw, are also called midos and also have a direct connection to character traits, more than just clothing. They were, listen carefully, the physical representations of all the lofty character traits that were fitting for the Mesharsei Elyon, servants of Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, in the house of Hashem. The wearer of Bigdei Kahuna basically possessed these great character traits that each one of these garments represented. And I'll give you 3 examples. Bashetach. Example number 1, the Me'il. The Me'il, we were told, atoned for evil speech, Lashon Hara. We said, Yavod over Bakol, Yechaper al Hakol. Okay, Lashon Hara. And you can find a lot of things that are hinted at in the way the Me'il was sewn and how it was produced that have to do with hints telling us how to keep away from Lashon Hara. Just for an example, that it was color techelet, sky blue. Techelet, Chazal say, dome layam, yam dome rakia, rakia lekisei hakavod. What did the color blue, sky blue, do for a person who looks at the color? It reminds them of the oceans. What's so special about the oceans? The oceans have the tide. And you can sit and watch day in and day out, and you'll see that tide, how it just comes and it just retreats. It comes with force and then it retreats. Why does it retreat? Because Hashem said that that's a chok natan. Hashem made a law of nature, that it goes so far the water and it doesn't go further. Also the heavenly bodies, they all have their orbits. So from the self-control, we can call it, that they have, we learn self-control for our mouths and the words that we release from our mouths. Anyways, but I want to go back to the idea of the midos and the begadim. Lashon Hara, as we know, causes rift, division, hatred. If a person speaks disparagingly about a husband in front of a wife, or vice versa, or about a person in front of his best friend, he can easily cause hatred and division between the two. But that's not what Aaron HaKohen did. He was Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom. He loved peace and actively pursued peace. And how did he do it? He carefully thought out his speech. And through doing that, he would mend rifts. He would go and bring out unity in Avas Yisrael within families. Like he would go and say something that he would say, I heard that he wants to be your friend, and go to the other one. And one of the techniques that he always used was by focusing and accentuating the positive in people. Where's a hint for that? The pomegranates, the rimonim that were found at the bottom of the me'il, on the fringe. As Chazal say, even the Risham of Am Yisrael are filled with mitzvos, just as pomegranates are filled with seeds. There's good in everyone, and by concentrating on the good side and reinforcing it, we give the person a chance to be good. And this was Aaron HaKohen. Ohev Shalom, that was his essence. V'Rodev Shalom. How did he do it? Through talking to people, communication, and positive communication, knowing how to bring out the good in everyone. So he wore the me'il, and he was all about speech used for construction and not for destruction, chas v'shalom. Example number 2, the Choshen. The Choshen atoned for mishpat, corruption and judgment. It's fascinating to find that Chazal make reference to the Choshen in a story in the Torah. In Parshas Shemos, Hashem, in Parshas, had just appointed Moshe Rabbeinu to be the number 1 person in Am Yisrael. He would take out Am Yisrael, take them to the Midbar, and give them the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, number 1 man in Klal Yisrael. Hashem then goes and informs Moshe that Aaron was on his way to greet Moshe as Moshe approached Mitzrayim. The words in the pasuk, V'ra'acha v'samach b'libo. He'll see you and he will rejoice in his heart. Rashi, v'ra'acha v'samach b'libo. Lo k'sha'ata savor, she'yehei makpid alecha sha'ata ola ligdula. You might think, I'm a little bit hesitant to meet Aaron. Maybe he's going to feel bad. Maybe he's going to feel a little uncomfortable that Moshe Rabbeinu, his little brother, is surpassing him. He's becoming number one person in Am Yisrael, and Aaron will only be the second in command. Lo kashata savor, Rashi says, shehei makpid. What does it say? It says, Ra'acha v'samach b'libo. Umisham zacha Aaron la'edi hachoshen hanasun al halev. Aaron, from this act of the simcha b'libo that he had when he saw Moshe Rabbeinu coming as the chosen one in Am Yisrael, for this he was zoche to the jewel of the choshen that he wears on the heart. So we might think, what's the connection? He rejoiced in his heart, so he gets a jewel on his heart. But we know that things go deeper. Chazal, they point out that the reward that Aharon received was in keeping with the rule of heavenly reward. That's midah keneged midah, measure for measure. There's a direct connection between the act that performed and the reward. The Akedas Yitzchak tells us that Big Day Kahuna were the midah, physical manifestations of the lofty character traits. Now the connection is very clear here. The Choshen atoned for mishpat, injustice and judgments. In order for the dayan, the judge, to judge properly, he must have a clear heart, clean of personal feelings that obscure his objectivity. Here in this story, Aaron proved that deep in his heart, he was clean of jealousy. Now this jealousy, sibling rivalry, that's one of the most strong jealousies that there are. The Balei HaMusar tell us the more a person has in common with someone, the more there is a nisayon of jealousy. There's place for jealousy. The more in common, the more it bothers us when there are differences. That's why a sibling, a relative, a neighbor, that bothers us much more than someone that we don't know anything about when they win the lottery, for example, or they get the highest mark or whatever. He was clean of jealousy, and not only that, his heart was filled with joy for his younger brother, who was chosen to be to a superior position. This heart was certainly worthy of wearing the ornament of the Choshen, which atoned for dinim in accurate judgments. And a third example, Mishpatzot Zahav. That's part of the Big Day Kahuna. It's not one of the 8, but it's part. It's the golden squares that contained the Avnei HaShoham that connected the Choshen to the ephod on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol through golden chains. The Mishpatzot Zahav maybe sound familiar because they're mentioned in Tehillim. Kol kvuda bas melech penima mi mishpatzot zahav levusha. The glory of the daughter of royalty is inward, and golden squares are her garments. Chazal teach us that this pasuk refers to a woman by the name of Kimchis. She lived in the time of Bayesheni, and she was the wife of one of the Kohanim Gedolim, and she herself had 7 sons, all who functioned as Kohanim Gedolim, which is an astounding feat. That means that they had the possibility of going in Lifnai v'Nifnim, in the Kodesh Kadashim, and coming out safe and sound. Chachamim asked Kimchis, what did she do to merit such amazing feat? What was her answer? That she always conducted herself with utmost modesty. Even in the privacy of her home, she was careful not to uncover her hair. And then Chazal tell us that many women did as Kimchis did, but they did not merit what she did. So first of all, let's make the point clear. Kimches conducted herself with utmost modesty at all times in all situations, but this modesty wasn't something that was external, that she did even in the modesty of her own four walls. A person can do things even to themselves and fake it. I don't even know if I would say fake it. I'm saying, where does it come from? What is motivating the person? Kimches's modesty, obviously, was rooted in a profound awareness of Hashem's presence. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. Tznius and Yira Shamayim were attributes that permeated Kimches's existence. So in effect, she was already wearing the midos of the priestly garments. An obvious reward followed. Her sons actually served in the Beis HaMikdash with all the garments that in the abstract sense Kimches had already attained. Again, the midos are the midos. The midos are the Bigdei Kehuna. And back to the original question, how did the Bigdei Kehuna effect atonement? It's clear now that this was no hocus pocus. The wearers of the Bigdei Kehuna, the Kohen Gadol, possessed sublime character traits, midot na'alot. And the point that we must bear in mind is that a person rarely sins just out of the clear blue sky one day. An act of sin is a result of the deterioration of character over an extended period of time. And ultimately, tshuva and shleimus can only be achieved through perfection of character. And the main formula for this tall order is our awareness of Hashem's connection to us as the key to building our feeling of self-worth. We spoke about this in Parshas Shemos. Your name, your individuality, your uniqueness, that's Geula. Hashem created each and every one of us with a unique personality. We have weaknesses and we have strengths. The first step is awareness, knowing who I am. What do I need to strengthen? And what do I want to continue with? And all that I turn to Hashem with which to work and to serve Him. When we work to perfect our midos, we come closer to attaining these wondrous garments. For we indeed all belong to Mamlechas Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, and we all can attain these midos of the Bigdei Kehuna for ourselves. B'lashon ha'akedas Yitzchak, shelo nignezu. These Bigdei Kehuna, asher tziva Hashem la'asot l'sharek b'kodesh, asher yil b'shem ha'shalem sheba'uma, that's a Kohen Gadol, lo levad l'hitnatzot mehem michutz, כי אם שיתעטר ויתפאר במעלות המעולות הנרמזות בהם. He didn't only wear the physical garments, he also had the midot, המעולות הנרמזות that are hinted. ובחינה זו לא נגנזו ולא ייגנזו לעולם. They're never unattainable, they're always accessible to us. כי כל אדם מישראל יכול גם כן לעשותם לעצמו, לכבוד ולתפארת בכל זמן ומקום. ואין שם שום זרוס, there's no cloud like we have in the things in the Beis HaMikdash, and including the begadim, that hazar hakarev yumat. There's no shum zarot, everyone, attainable to all. So we can attain these midos, and we wish, and I bench all of us that we will, Be'ezrat Hashem, and we're zochet to the nevuah, sosa sispa Hashem, tagel nafshi be'elokai, ki hilbishani bigdei yesha mi'il tzedakah yahateni, referring to these great garments. So everything that we learned today should be a zuchus to protect the soldiers, for the Matir Asurim, the Shvuim, they should come home as soon as possible. There should be a big nitzachon for Am Yisrael that should reverberate throughout the world. V'kadesh Shimcha ba'olamecha, kishmeinu karasa b'shmecha. Thank you very much. A good Arab Shabbos and Purim Katan too.